Back in 1986, the Hyrule fantasy, also known as The Legend of Zelda, created what would go on to be one of the longest running video game series in history, alongside its successful sibling, Super Mario. Selling all around the world and becoming a household name, perhaps not as much as Super Mario, but the Legend of Zelda series is very well known. It's the type of game that multiple generations of a family could know of. I mean, it was my dad who got me into Zelda by allowing me to watch and play games like A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, and eventually giving me the chance to try these games and get me into the series. They are so intriguing and captivating once immersed. The series is built on fantasy adventure stories of a young man named Link out to save his friend, and sometimes more than a friend, Zelda. Obviously all fiction stories including magical swords, dragons, mythical creatures, and even a tortilla chip as the main prized possession relic of the world. But what if I told you that one of these games was actually based on a true story? Kind of. Well, that's exactly what we'll be going over in today's Zelda story time, or whatever I'll dub these storytelling videos. Be sure to go and grab yourself a snack or drink and send them in to get featured right here, and let's get into the story. To begin our story, which Zelda was inspired by / based on true stories? Well, that would be the 1986 Nintendo Entertainment System classic, The Legend of Zelda, the first entry to the series. But I hear you asking, how can that game be based on a true story? It barely has a story. Well. Listen up. To explain this in full detail, we must first know who created this game, Mr. Shigeru Miyamoto. This is the man behind not just Zelda, but also Super Mario, Donkey Kong, F-Zero, Pikmin, and Star Fox. He is one of, if not the most well-known names associated with Nintendo, and just in the video game industry in general. Of course, you also have the musical genius Koji Kondo and the likes of Eiji Aonuma, but Shigeru Miyamoto is the creator of this series, and the very first game was based on various experiences in his personal life. But what are they? I highly doubt he went outside to fight a pig with a magical sword. Obviously that part is fantasy, but a lot of it isn't. Miyamoto grew up in a Japanese town called Sonobe, Kyoto. At the time, there wasn't the grand entertainment systems we have at home today. Back then, kids would go outside to play. Miyamoto was very fond of exploration in his surrounding area, specifically the woodlands, hillsides, and even caves nearby. These places would often hide scenic lakes within the woods or unexpected caves within the rocks. It was a very nature-filled place, but he'd even venture to rural villages nearby too. The kid loved exploring far and wide. Well, far and wide for a young child, and it was within all of these adventures as a young boy that the inspiration for The Legend of Zelda was formed. One specific story that he revealed in an interview was about the time he actually ventured into a cave all by himself, calling it one of his most memorable experiences growing up there. He essentially found a small cave in the middle of the woods, and after some hesitation, went inside and explored it with the help of a lantern. I don't know about you, but to me that is such an awesome childhood story to tell. It was adventures like that which created and inspired him with The Legend of Zelda, true, real experiences in his life. Obviously the game's story isn't quite literally about Miyamoto himself, but when you take a look at the traversal in this game, it is pretty accurate to those childhood experiences. The game is primarily made up of exploring an area, going into woodlands, open areas, finding lakes, and even exploring caves. Of course, a lot more was added onto that, such as the fictional story, but the foundations of this game were inspired by true events. He's even said that the series was an attempt to bring life to a miniature garden for players to play through, essentially capturing these adventures as a child into a digital experience, just amplified by medieval fantasy storylines. Now, although not based on Miyamoto's own experiences, there is also a real person behind the name Zelda. Apparently, this comes from real-life novelist, I can't say that word, I'll just put it on screen, and painter Zelda Fitzgerald. According to Miyamoto, the name sounded, quote, pleasant and significant, thus using the name Zelda for the princess and naming the game after her. The Legend of Zelda. Sadly, I can't sit here and tell you that Ganon, the Triforce, and the magic of the Master Sword are based on real events, but I can tell you a fun fact. The Master Sword was actually inspired by Excalibur, the Arthurian legend. Another fun fact, the story was actually developed by Takashi Tezuka. As he set out to create a sort of fairy tale adventure game, he was inspired by the fantasy book series The Lord of the Rings. I'm sure you've heard of it. Tezuka even once mentioned how the location Death Mountain that was written into the game's story was actually actually once a working title for a completely different story inspired by medieval Europe, and that this earlier story even involved the concept of the Triforce before any of this entered the Legend of Zelda we eventually got. It's fair to say that the creation of this game drew inspiration from a lot of different sources, some fiction, some non-fiction, and honestly, I think that is part of the charm. Overall, I guess a lot of this is up to your own interpretation as to what defines it being inspired by or based on. The story? No, not at all. But the game itself at base value? Yes, 100%, it's inspired by true events from Shigeru Miyamoto's life growing up in Japan. Fanboy ramble incoming. It's pieces of information like this that really expand my love for Nintendo more and more. I grew up playing these games, and before even playing them myself, I'd watch my dad play them. To learn the inspiration behind what built this series I've grown up with so close to my heart throughout life just hit the heartstrings a little. It also reminded me of being a young child and how something as simple as exploring your local area can feel like an epic expedition into another world. I grew up often seeing both woodlands and lochs. That's Scottish for lake, and hearing Miyamoto's story brought me back. I can't even explain why, but it just makes me so happy to know this story, and after looking more into it to get as many details as I could, I just knew I had to make a video talking about this. Maybe some of you have heard this story, or little bits of it, but after learning more, like I said, I just had to make a video. I know it's a bit of a shorter video, but that's kind of what I'm aiming to do with these storytime videos, getting right into the story and sharing it with you all, then also rambling for a bit. I hope this little story puts a smile on your face, or that you just enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more Zelda storytime videos, then let me know in the comments. Thanks a ton for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to drop a like and consider subscribing for more fabulous Zelda content. How cool is this little story behind the inspiration of The Legend of Zelda? If it wasn't for Miyamoto's childhood adventures, we may have never even got this series to begin with. Go outside and play, kids. Anyway, be sure to leave a comment with your best memory of playing these games. I'm feeling a little wholesome and want to hear. Look out for my replies. Before I wrap up, I want to give a quick update for my 100k Q&A video. It is still coming. I've noticed a few of you asking both here on YouTube and on my Discord server, and the answer is yes, I'm still doing a 100k Q&A video. It's just been a busy past month or so for me, and it's been hard to work on such a big video, as I'm trying to answer as many questions as I can in one video. There is still plenty of time to submit any questions you may have for me. I'm only taking them from certain posts though, just to make it more organized. So I'll link the posts in the description if you want to leave a question for the 100k video. I appreciate your patience, and as always, a huge special thank you goes out to all of my supporters across Patreon and YouTube. If you'd like to join them and get yourself a shout out upon joining and your name at the end of every video, then consider supporting. Again, thanks for watching, and until the next time, I've been NeoGamer.